Okay, so now we're going to transition to the portion of this webinar that many attendees have found most valuable, which is hearing directly from someone with firsthand lived experience. So we're pleased to introduce Reeve Jason Schneider, who currently serves as the Reeve for Vulcan County. Reeve Schneider was elected to Vulcan County Council in 2013 and has served as the Reeve since 2016. He's also served on the RMA Board of Directors since 2020. Rooted in a deep understanding of rural issues, Reeve Schneider has been an active voice on council, focusing on improving infrastructure, supporting local industry, and ensuring transparent, accountable governance. Reeve Schneider is active in the farming community in Vulcan County and operates a fourth generation grain farm along with his wife and two kids. As well as farming, he's worked in the IT sector, specializing in mainframes and large storage systems. So for the next few minutes, Reeve Schneider will share some of his experiences and answer your questions, which I'll remind you to start popping in the Q&A portal. If you don't see it, look for the three little dots. So Reeve Schneider, thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe to start, tell us a little bit about your community and think back 12 years, if my math is correct, and think back to 2013 and why you ran for council in the first place.
Yeah, boy, I think it seems a little bit strange that I'm the one talking about joining council because it feels like just yesterday that I was having the same thoughts as probably a lot of people on this call. A little bit about Vulcan County, where the area, if you draw a straight line between Lethbridge and Calgary, kind of that area in the middle, that's Vulcan County. We're a pretty big area. I always like to put it into perspective for people. We cover a lot of land. We're 6.5 times the size of Calgary, but we've only got about 4,500 residents. So we definitely we have some unique challenges out here. We have a lot of area, a lot of infrastructure, but not a lot of people. So I grew up in this area. I've called it home for the vast majority of my life. And after I graduated high school, I went on. My parents said you should probably go get a degree because farming is sometimes a little bit unpredictable. So I went off to the big city of Lethbridge and eventually migrated into Calgary and started my career there. But it I guess when you're a farm kid, you aren't really never feel too comfortable in the big city. So it about 10 years later, I migrated back to my hometown, and that's kind of where my council journey actually started. I'd been away for a few years, and I moved back, and started talking to people that I knew and other people who had done the same thing and moved back, and we started to kind of identify some things that we were kind of in different stages of our lives, right? We made big decisions to move back and move back to the communities that we grew up in. And it wasn't anything, one issue, but it was just that kind of looking at things a little more progressively and just like kind of looking at your community. And you'd been away for 10 years, and it was like somebody paused the tape, right? It was exactly the same as when you left. And kind of the mentality that was and sometimes is in the rural areas was keep the roads good, don't raise our taxes, and that's what council does. And I was kind of at that point where I thought, well, I think it's a little bit more than that. I think we can be a little more progressive. I think there's a lot more we can do as a community. And so I did what most everybody did, and probably some people in this call have done, is I, started talking to people and, saying, kind of what I thought and trying to convince them to run for council. And ultimately that was unsuccessful. I kept going to people that I knew and respected and said, you know what, you should run for council. And we'd have that conversation. They go, yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. And they're like, but I don't want to do it. Like, you should do it. And I'm like, and eventually I ran out of people. So I thought, well, shoot, I'm kind of at the point now that I guess if nobody's going to do it, I guess I better put my name in. So I put my name for council, and I guess yeah, the rest is history. 12 years later, I'm still here, and it's definitely been a journey. I think the phrase that I like to use, it's the best job I ever had, and it's the worst job I've ever had, and it just depends on the day. It's really one of those. It can be very rewarding, but there's also days where you really scratch your head and you wonder, why am I doing this? This is crazy. But after 12 years, I've really enjoyed it. I think that some of the points that were brought up earlier in the webinar here, are very true. I kind of have the luxury now of looking back 12 years and looking at some of the things we've been able to accomplish in our community, and I'm pretty proud of it. We're not a big community, but we've been able to do some really big things, and yeah, it's just been great. And I mean, there's a lot of opportunities once you get onto council. If if you're interested or willing, there's lots of regional boards and things that you can get onto. And if you want to learn, there's no
Mhm.
limit into what you can learn as a municipal councilor. There's a lot of opportunities, and it's really a job. It's kind of you get out of it what you put into it. And if you're willing to take on some extra responsibilities, you can really it can be extremely rewarding.
Great. And I do want to ask this one question from several questions coming in, and this is one segue from when you first decided to run and that story. So, question is maybe some words of encouragement first, and then also a question around how to start. So, from you, what if what I worry about is losing? I'm ready to go all in, but what if I don't get enough votes? Also, how should I start?
Yeah, no, that's no, nobody puts their names in for public office, and hopes to lose, right? It's you're putting yourself out there on the line, and that was definitely, that month of campaigning was definitely kind of nerve-wracking, right? You kept thinking like, oh. I really hope what I'm saying is resonating. I hope that
Yep.
people would actually take the time to come and vote for me. It's easy for people, when you're standing on their doorstep to say, "Oh yeah, no, I totally support you," and then not show up. So, yeah, you got to put yourself out there. But really, what I found was that it's that time before you start campaigning that's actually the most valuable. I
Mm,
think it was mentioned earlier. Put down some reasons why you're running, and I found I kind of came up with six things that
yeah.
I really wanted to see changed. And when I put those down, it kind of really spurred me to get
Mm,
out there and start talking to people. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. You're putting yourself out there, and it's not fun to lose an election, but you just kind of have to power through it, and it's kind of the part of the process.
yeah.
And then sometimes not enough people run and you have an acclamation, right? So
Yeah, in smaller communities,
Yeah.
there's quite a few times where people are kind of sitting back and waiting to see who's going to run. And if they think that you would do a good job, they just kind of back off. So yeah, there's sometimes you do a lot of work getting ready for a campaign, and then on nomination day, you're the only one who put your name in, and you go,
Mm,
oh, like oh, okay, well that was, but I think if nothing else, it does prepare you for your first day on council to really know why you're there and to really kind of know what the issues that you're passionate about are. I've seen some counselors who, they kind of got, pushed into it by someone else, and they put their papers in it on the first day. It's just like, it's it's a lot because they're just kind of doing it because no one else would. But I do find that being prepared for that first day of council definitely makes it a little bit easier. And a lot of it is, if you talk to enough people in your community, you can figure out what the issues are pretty quickly. Like people will tell you what they like and what they don't like, and I really found that campaigning process actually really prepared me for that first day, because
mm,
I I had been told what was going good, and I'd been told what wasn't going good.
they
great.
became familiar with the issues by talking to people. We have some more. A lot of people have like campaign related questions today. So I have all my signatures and my registration fee ready. When can I start door knocking? And when do I start placing campaign signs on people's lawns? Well, the general answer is now, whenever you want. You could start now. But yeah, if you have any thoughts or comments on that, Reeve Schneider, about thinking back to when you did your first campaign, maybe what were some of the strategies you thought of? And especially given the size of your municipality, the distance of it being such a large region, what kind of strategy did you use to connect with voters? Was door knocking the best thing you did? What do you think?
Yeah, so in a rural area, door knocking is the number one. You gotta stand on people's porches and talk about the issues. That was I kind of made the commitment that I was going to try to get to every house in my area, and I was almost there. I literally just ran out of time, and really it was my own fault because I'm a little too chatty. I I got invited in for coffee way too many times, and then an hour later, you're catching up with somebody at their kitchen table, and you go, "Oh shoot, like well, it's gonna be a pretty unproductive evening here." So, yeah, you kind of you do get better as you go along, but it is people want to have conversations and talk about the issues, and that was actually the hardest thing I found was actually just you know being able to move on to the next place because like I said, I drank a lot of coffee. It was I didn't really get I didn't sleep much because I had had so much caffeine because everywhere I went somebody wanted to give you a coffee and have an hour chat. But yeah, and then back when I did it, it was a little bit different. You kind of had that 30-day window where you put your papers in and then you started campaigning and yeah, it was a little bit of a grind. I do like that now you can start campaigning a lot earlier, and I think that just gives you that opportunity to kind of do it at more at your pace. You used to be you had to really pound the pavement really hard because you just had limited time. So yeah, it's starting to have those conversations, and I did up a brochure, and I mean I kind of did a kind of a one pager. I printed it off of my home printer. I really didn't go to a huge expense. And yeah, just really kind of the six things I was running on, kind of who I was, and just also I think it's also helpful is especially on your campaign stuff is to tell people where to vote and when to vote because no matter how many times everybody it's put out there, people just kind of forget or whatever. So I always found that on my campaigning material to have, where your voting station is, what the date of the vote is, and the times that they can go vote was extremely helpful. I did eventually print some signs up, and it wasn't really my idea. It was one of my ratepayers. Well, I've been on council too long. I call them ratepayers, but one of my neighbors was like, "Why don't you have signs?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just trying to knock on everyone's doors." And he's like, "Ah, it's stupid. You need signs." So he actually went and got me signs printed. So it was yeah, it was kind of a it was
There's a
kind of a
campaign volunteer for
yeah,
you.
it was
Yeah,
Yeah,
there you
that
go.
was
good
that was actually
connection.
pretty nice of them. So
Yeah.
but yeah, really it's having those conversations are the most valuable thing. And also like, people aren't always home. It's hard to track people down and it's really, having something that you can leave on their door, put in their mailbox and just say, like I stopped by, as well as having your contact information and please phone if you have any questions or if
Mhm.
you'd like me to return. I will happily come back and have that conversation with you. I found that that was really campaigning wise, that was the most valuable thing is that even if you couldn't get a hold of someone is to show that you took the time to come and talk to them and you made yourself very very available. One of the other things was you had mentioned in your webinar is you're not going to have all the answers, especially when you're campaigning. I laugh at what I thought I knew when I was campaigning and to now what I like learned later. I'm like, oh, a couple of my campaign points might have been a little ambitious, but what I really found was that people are going to have questions for you, and you're not going to have the answers. And I mean, I think people do respect if you say, I don't know, I'm going to look into it. But the biggest thing is if you say that. Is you have to get back to them. That's the number one thing because yeah, if you say, "Oh yeah, I'll totally get back to you," and then you ghost them, they're probably not going to vote for you because they're going to go like, wow, you made me a promise on my doorstep and you didn't live up to that one. So it was
Mhm.
really about, I had a notebook in the truck and every time, you'd stop at someone's house and they'd ask a specific question, I'd write it down and then I'd be like, make myself a note like, gotta remember to phone these people back or you need to stop back in because, I think that really shows that, you are committed and, you're not just going to, pay them lip service and then, totally forget about them.
Absolutely. We have a couple questions here. Well, maybe we'll shift gears a bit and lean in on when you become a counselor and what the day-to-day kind of looks like from a governance perspective. So we have three or four questions here, and I'm going to kind of amalgamate them. Um, amalgamate's probably not a great word. Amalgamate them into one question. So maybe talk about the dynamic between council. We touched on in the webinar, but the dynamic between council and the CAO and kind of the influence or like how are decisions made and how does council give direction to the CAO? Is that through a formal governance process through council? Is it informal conversations? I think I know the answer, but maybe it's something that you can kind of just walk us through the process to, and then like how much power does the CAO have versus council, like that kind of dynamic.
Yeah. So, I mean, the primarily the way you give direction to your CAO and and as a byproduct, the staff is through council meetings. It's it has to be a decision of in our case it's seven councilors. It has to be done there. Of course, every councilor has informal conversations with the CAO, especially if you're looking for information, in between meetings, that you definitely reach out to the CAO. But
Yeah.
I always say that I sit on the one side of the table and the administration sits on the other side, but I think the CAO job is one of the hardest things ever because you have three, five, seven, nine, even in some cases, even more bosses. And it's really that dynamic can be very challenging for some. I've definitely seen counselors over the years who think that they just pick up the phone and they tell the CAO what to do, and that's not a healthy relationship. You have to make sure that that direction is coming as a group and from council. So yeah, I would say that's actually probably one of the most challenging things, especially for new counselors to kind of comprehend because you're excited, you want to get stuff done. You have these little projects or these little issues that you want to get fixed, and it's easy to pick up the phone and tell the CEO to get it done, but that's really not the way it's supposed to be because you're one of seven votes, right? And I mean, that's a challenging one as well. You may have an idea or you may have a project that you don't want to get done, and if the majority council doesn't agree, it doesn't go forward, and that's kind of a hard one. That's a very challenging thing as well because I had one counselor tell me he had brought something forward and it got voted down to council, and he said, well, like, it's ridiculous, like, I'm right. It's like, "Hell, you can be as right as you want, but if you can't get the majority council to agree with you, it doesn't happen." And that's it's just a very different dynamic than anything you typically deal with in a private sector or any other job, right? There's usually kind of that pretty established chain of command. Council, it's a little bit different of a beast, and it takes a little while to get used to. But I think especially once you get familiar with it, and especially once council is familiar with it, it works quite well. But you as a council have to keep that relationship with the CAO. That's an important one as well. Like, yes, they are the employee of council, but if you guys are button heads, it doesn't make council all that productive, and it makes it a lot more frustrating. So it's kind of making sure that you kind of follow within those bounds, and typically, even if you have a question, one of the practices we always use is if someone has a question for our administrator, I always say CC the rest of council. Put it on the email, and then everybody's hearing the same information because it can be pretty frustrating if you feel that this counselor has different information and this counselor has different information. You start to
Yeah.
get kind of disjointed. So it's really important that everybody's kind of on the same page and getting the same amount of information. So when it comes to decision time, everybody's on an even playing field.
That's a
Or
great segue. Oh, sorry, Mike. Did you
Oh no,
want to
but I
follow up?
just want to mention before we get to the next question, we are noticing that there are a lot of questions in the Q&A around more of the details about running finances and the process. And I just want to draw everyone's attention. We're going to spend our time with Reeve Schneider more on on his experience in council, but I just want to draw everyone's attention to the chat where there are resources from the government of Alberta, municipal affairs that have a lot of these details, and rural municipalities of Alberta and Alberta municipalities will have a lot of these details on their website, and I'll be more than happy to connect with you after this as well. So sorry about that, Julia. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so this is a good segue to what you were just saying. Sometimes egos get in the way of doing what's right for the community. And I think this question is both about, how do you address that in a positive tone while campaigning on the door? So, you don't always want to be negative about the current council or about future councils and how those decisions are made, or even how do you balance egos in the room when council maybe isn't agreeing on a big decision? What's your experience been?
Yeah, so campaigning is sometimes a tricky one because you will have people who want to kind of draw you into, the drama of it, and they want to talk about, a former counselor or a former decision of council, and it is a bit challenging to try to, steer that conversation back to positive. It's you're Yeah, you're not going to win if you're just out there mudslinging against a previous counselor or something. So you
Mhm.
really have to try to keep it positive. But I will say that you will find that challenging when you are knocking on doors because yeah, people sometimes do love the drama and they want to hear your thoughts on council. But you really just need to focus on it. And I found once again back to kind of when you have your 3, 4, 5, 6 points written out there, it's you do find it easy to kind of it's easier to steer back that. Now, when you get onto council, obviously, typically counselors are, kind of A-type personalities. They want to be, they're there, they want to get stuff done. They want to be in charge, and you're just one of seven. And so, keeping your ego in check can be challenging, and some people do struggle with that one.
Mhm.
But it's you're part of a team. It's a really funny team because you're all individual elected by individual people and you all have one vote, but you kind of do have to work as a team, and it can sometimes be challenging, and you know you're you, you until you kind of get beat up at council one day, and by beat up I mean you bring something forward, you have a great idea and council doesn't agree with it. That sucks. That's kind of a that's kind of a crummy day, and you have to lick your wounds, and you have to move on to the next issue, and that's the important thing is that you're not always going to get your way. You're not always going to be right. But once that item is done, you need to move to the next item, and you need to put that behind you, and it the first couple times it sucks. Talk to yourself on the way home, and you complain to your wife or something. But once you've done it for a while, you start to go, okay, well, today didn't go my way, but you know what? I got to keep fighting. I got to keep positive, and be ready for the next item and the next battle.
Right. We have a question about Robert's Rules of Orders. So bonus points to the anonymous attendee who knows what Robert's Rules
Yeah.
of Orders is or are. But I'm going to rephrase it a bit. So the question is, does the person need to be well acquainted with Robert's Rules of Orders? So that's one thing. But rephrase the question of like, there's a steep learning curve when you are new to council. So maybe like talk about like that steep learning curve. So like what you're exposed to when you're first on council, budgeting, land use decisions, process from Robert's Rules of Order and how meetings work. And then maybe like what resources are available to help you along that learning journey, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, full disclosure, I didn't really know Robert's Rules of Orders at all when
Yeah.
I joined council. So, if you're not too familiar with it, don't feel too bad. You do pick it up, relatively quickly.
Yeah.
A lot of it
And you
is
have a clerk.
yeah, and administration, typically you have kind of a recording secretary, the CEO will help along that process to make sure that you are doing things properly and following Robert's Rule of Order. So there are some great resources online. There's kind of some quick cheat sheets that you can get online, to kind of help you along that process. But I would say that's really not, I wouldn't spend too much time trying to
Yeah.
memorize Robert's Rule of Order before getting on council. But yeah, that. So I mean, the big thing with council is, the day you get elected, you are now, you're kind of you're in charge. Like you got to now become an expert on a lot of different things. And those first couple months, it's we always use the analogy of drinking from a fire hose because
Yeah.
you are going to be overwhelmed, and that's part of the process. And I wish it could be different, but that's just the process. And you just have to, if you're not understanding something, is ask the questions, because I've seen a lot of people who just sit back and go, oh well, I'll just I'll just watch. You do need to get comfortable as a counselor, because typically the way the Alberta election cycle works is you get elected, you have to then get some of your there's some courses you need to take as an elected official, and then it's budget time, and it's like all of a
Hmm.
sudden now you are responsible for a budget, and it's a big budget. I mean, when you will have your eyes open to how many different things a municipality does, and how many line items, and how many departments, and all these things. And that first budget is rough. It is extremely overwhelming. But once again, is make sure you ask the questions, because if you just sit back and hope that everybody else is going to do it for you, that's that's not really doing your role properly. So
Hmm.
you take that time. And And the big thing that I found is, there's going to be returning counselors or even administration that is happy to talk about it and happy to get in depth on things. Administration actually really likes when you get in depth on things. They love those questions. So I made sure that you don't want to ask stupid questions, but if when you ask them, I always found that people were very, very happy to try to help you because, like, once again, it was said earlier, we everybody was in the same boat. Everybody, that first budget, everybody remembers that first budget on just how overwhelming it was. But when you take the time and you prepare and you ask the questions, it makes sense. And then that second budget is, well, the second budget is so much easier. You feel like, okay, now I get what we're doing, and it really does get easier. But I mean that the first couple months, it's overwhelming, but it's
Yep.
just that's just the nature of the job, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, is you don't need to know everything right away and you're not making the budget all by yourself. So really to lean into the expertise of the counselors that have been before you. And if you have that opportunity to talk to chat with other people who've been elected, even through mentorship with like joining maybe Muni, the RMA, and meeting other elected officials in the same position as you. It's a great way to do it. I think that's just about all the time that we have for today. So as a reminder, the webinar will be posted on the Alberta Municipalities and Rural Municipalities of Alberta websites. And there are several more coming over the remaining weeks. So we want to thank you, Reeve, for giving us your time this evening, your volunteer personal time to do this and to help come and mentor other people. So we want to give you the final word. What's your elevator pitch? How do you convince people? What are you going to say? You already tried to convince a bunch of people before you ran the first time, I guess.
Yeah,
What would
I
you
was
say to the
I
group
was relatively
today?
unsuccessful in that, unfortunately. But yeah, it's that if you have questions, ask them. And I know sometimes you get, if you're running in whatever X municipality, you might not feel comfortable reaching out to the counselors of that council, especially if you're going to be challenging one of them. And in those circumstances, reach out to a neighboring municipality. I found that in my municipal journey here is people who are elected are happy to talk about these things, especially if you're interested in running. I find that most people are very, very generous with their time into talking about, what the job entails, or even kind of how it works in their municipality. It might be very different than the municipality you're running for, but it can really give you some perspective. And that's where I think the Alberta Municipalities Association, as well as the Rural Municipalities of Alberta, it's great. It's a great networking opportunity because you're not in this alone. Like you sometimes you kind of get tunnel vision and you're just looking at your municipality and you kind of lose sight of of the big picture. And it's really great when you're able to kind of talk to people from other areas and kind of gain their perspective get some knowledge from them as well. So it's really don't be afraid to pick up the phone. I've talked to many people over the years who've been thinking about running that don't even live in my area, and it's a big thing, but it's very rewarding, and I think that's really the kind of what it the last words is just that stressing is it's an important job, and but there's a lot of help out there. So if you're worried about all the things that were listed earlier, start talking to some people who've been there, and I think you'll find out that there's a lot of people that are willing to kind of help you with that journey and help you be successful as a counselor.